Hey, what is up guys? MKBHD here, and in a world with 1080p smartphones now becoming more and more popular with the Droid DNA and the Oppo Find 5 and the ZTE Grand S and the LG Optimus G Pro and the Huawei Ascend Mate and many others, two have set themselves pretty clearly as the kings of the 1080p smartphones, and they're pretty much guaranteed to be competing with each other side by side in stores around the country nationwide. You guys already know it's the HTC One versus the Samsung Galaxy S4, two flagships we're going to be seeing a lot of this year. So without any further ado, let's compare them and see which one ends up being the better choice for you. So we'll start with the obvious, and that's build quality. And the HTC One is arguably the best built phone that's ever been made, and it's definitely the best built phone that HTC has ever made. And it's built so well that it brings into question the build quality of other smartphones like the Galaxy S4, because that's actually, at this point now, the physically biggest difference between these two phones is the material and the construction that put them together. And that's the funny thing, because the first impression that people get of the smartphone is just holding it in the hand. So if I gave one of these and one of these to the same person, they would probably immediately give you an answer about which one they like more, which one feels better in the hand, which one they think they would rather buy. And then you turn the phones on and you get a whole different experience. But the immediate first impression you get about the phone is how it feels. Now I want you guys to hear this. Because this is probably the scariest part of the difference between the way these are built. This is the HTC One. I'm going to go ahead and flex it at the strongest that I would ever flex a phone. This is going to be full strength flex, and just listen. And the phone barely budges. It's not going to bend all that much, and I'm probably going to damage it if I do any more stress to it, but that's a whole lot of pressure to put a phone under. This is the Galaxy S4, and have a listen to this. I'm going to flex it at about 20%. And you can see it's flexing when I do that. And there's a whole lot of different weird noises and popping and creaking going on because the back is removable, and that's probably a little bit of it. But just, I feel like I'm going to break the phone if I do that anymore. That's about 50%. I'm not going to put any more stress on it. That's concerning to me that there's such a big disparity in the build quality between these phones. Now, Samsung has said, and I've interviewed people on the Samsung team, that they have their own reasons for using plastic, and they're perfectly valid reasons, and there are pros and cons to using plastic, and there are pros and cons to using metal, like we all already know. The pros to a metal-built phone are build quality, durability, and feel in the hand. And like I said with the HTC One, it's a phone that I just kind of want to pick up and mess around with. It's got the best feel in the hand of any phone I've ever used. But the cons of metal are, number one, chipping. It tends to get chipped more easily. It's not as easily broken like the Galaxy S4's plastic, but it's a lot easier to chip if you drop it. And number two, temperature sensitivity. When the HTC One gets cold, it gets really cold. And when the HTC One gets hot, it gets really hot because metal is naturally more conductive than plastic. There's also another minor con to metal where there's not as great a radio sensitivity, so the radios kind of have to have their own place to go through the bands of the phone. The Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and 3G and 4G reception might not be as good if the phone is all metal, but luckily the HTC One takes care of that with a few bands of plastic around the phone. And then if we look at the pros and cons of plastic, they are the exact opposite, switched around upside down. So the cons of plastic are build quality, feel in the hand, durability, and the pros of plastic are radio strength and all the same cons that we had with metal. Overall though, if I had to pick a winner for build quality and sort of structure and the way it feels, I think 9 out of 10 people would agree that the HTC One takes that. It's probably the best built phone out there, and if you hand both phones to someone on the street and say, here, which one do you think costs more? They'll probably have a pretty quick answer for you. Now, besides the actual material that these phones are made of, there are also some physical differences between the phones that potential buyers will notice. So when you hold them side by side, you'll notice the shape of the phones, with the Galaxy S4 being much more square and the One being more taper along the back. And there's also the weight. Naturally, the metal HTC One will feel significantly heavier in the hand. And in fact, it's actually been said that the Galaxy S4 feels really light. It feels lighter than it looks. So there's a pretty big weight difference here. There's also the difference in the button layouts. So around the outside, I mentioned in the HTC One review, which will be linked below that like button, the top power button takes some getting used to. It's on the top instead of the side like other devices, and I stand by that. It's still a little bit quirky at first. And the volume rockers are on the opposite sides on these phones. So again, a minor difference, but they're like a mirror image of each other. It's something you'll have to take a few days to get used to when switching. And also on the front, you also have a major button difference. So the Galaxy S4 has a physical home button in the middle, plus a capacitive menu button on the left and a capacitive back button on the right. That works for the most part, and on the HTC One, you have the logo in the center, which does nothing when you press it, and you also have a capacitive home button on the right and back button on the left. So again, mirror images of each other. No menu button, which means that certain apps will get their own gigantic dedicated menu button, taking up precious screen real estate. But again, that's a minor difference, not something that you'll never get used to. Another gargantuan difference, though, is the speakers. The Galaxy S4 has a single rear-facing speaker on the back of the phone that can actually be completely covered and muffled with a badly placed single finger by accident. The HTC One, on the other hand, has two massive front-facing stereo speaker drivers that absolutely blow every other device out the water. I've done tests with these. It's in the HTC One review if you want to watch it, but they produce insanely great, crisp, loud, and clear audio that still impresses me today, and I've been using the phone for weeks, so it's really great speakers. Now, onto the performance side of things, if you've seen my review of each of these phones, which like I said are below, you'll notice that they're both spec'd very, very well. Both of them are endowed with that new Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 processor. Similar clock speeds, not identical, but like I said, pretty much everything is very well spec'd here. And they also get similar benchmark scores, so they're very, very close in terms of the performance department. But I did notice a bit of stuttering on some places in the Galaxy S4, particularly in the gallery and sometimes in the notification shade, that I absolutely did not notice in the HTC One. Now, I mentioned that the HTC One in the review was a very quick phone, and it's a very responsive phone throughout that video, and I stand by that, and I would actually give a slight performance advantage, at least in consistency, to the HTC One. It's just overall a really, really blisteringly fast phone. Even though, again, they come out with about the same battery life, and you really probably won't notice a performance difference if you don't use them both, but I would give just that slight edge to the One. Now, another thing is about the operating systems. The Galaxy S4 is actually running a newer version of Android underneath, Android 4.2, instead of the HTC One's 4.1. So you will get some of those new Android 4.2 feature additions on the Galaxy S4, like lock screen widgets and quick settings in the notification panel that you won't see on the HTC One. At least right now. I say that because HTC has so much riding on this phone that I wouldn't be surprised to see an update right around the corner for this guy very soon. Now, that being said, there's another hotly debated area when comparing these two flagships, and that is their cameras. So on the outside, the HTC One has a pretty flat element, as you can see, while the Galaxy S4's protrudes a little, but the HTC One has a 4 ultra-pixel camera, while the Galaxy S4 has a more traditional 13 megapixel sensor inside. And it's tough because usually smartphone cameras, no matter what, are pretty similar and both take such similar great pictures that it's not really worth comparing the two. But with this HTC One, it's pretty obvious that with only 4 megapixels, they're taking a completely different approach to the camera optics. Very risky. But to sum it all up, the Galaxy S4 takes better, more accurate, more detailed pictures in regular light, while the HTC One takes better, more accurate, more detailed pictures in low light. The S4 in low light it's alright, and the HTC One in regular light it's alright. I mean, there are obviously way more software features with the Galaxy S4 and a sweet camera interface taken from the Galaxy camera to back it all up, so they're making it look very pretty, but these comparisons really do most of the talking. So you can see that in low light, the Galaxy S4 does a decent job, but the HTC One does a better job. Again, in low light, the Galaxy S4 does a decent job, but the One does a better job. In regular light though, which I don't know about you, but that's where I take most of my pictures, you can see that the HTC One's 4 megapixel shot kind of falls apart when you try to zoom in or look at any detail, but the Galaxy S4's 13 megapixel shot is just crispy and crunchy all the way through, thanks to that improved sensor from the Galaxy S3. Honestly, if I was a huge picture-taking person with my phone, my pick would be the Galaxy S4 every single time, and I know that a lot of you guys are suckers for pixels just like I am, and the more flexibility I have with zooming in and cropping my pictures with 13 megapixels, the better. Another slight difference, though, that nobody ever seems to talk about between these cameras is the wider angle lens on the HTC One's front and back-facing cameras. So the front-facing camera is a wider angle to allow more people into the shot, so if you need selfies with your friends, you can fit more friends. And even the back-facing camera is also a slightly wider angle. So the HTC One, check out how many robots are in the frame with the One's camera versus the S4's. Pretty neat stuff if you ask me. A lot of people won't notice that because if you only use one of the phones and not the other, you'll never know. but there is definitely a noticeable difference in crop between the two. When we were speaking about pixels, so I'll just go ahead and say that these are both awesome 1080p smartphone displays. The Galaxy S4 happens to be an AMOLED display coming in at 5 inches, so you'll get deep blacks and very contrasty images, and of course a very high pixel density. And the HTC One is an LCD panel at 4.7 inches, so an even slightly higher pixel density. And you'll get much brighter and more readable looks outdoors on the HTC One, and you also get more accurate colors with that LCD panel. So both of these I like a lot. You're going to get crazy sharp images and video when you're looking at any content on either of these phones. And then of course there is HTC Sense versus TouchWiz. This one's your call. They're both Android, so you can make it whatever you want it to be, no matter what it looks like out the box. So at the end of the day, no matter how you look at it, these are both great phones. And whatever you happen to go for, if you go for the One or if you go for the S4, your money will probably be very well spent. And I wouldn't have any problem recommending either one. And I doubt you'll be disappointed if you do pull the trigger. So you really can't go wrong with either one. So put your money where your heart is. So there you go. That is pretty much every argument for and against each of these two superphones, the HTC One and the Galaxy S4. What is your pick? What would you rather have? What have you already bought over the other? Which one would you say is the better smartphone? Personally, for my personal pick, for those of you wondering, I would give the nod to the HTC One as my potential most used phone. Now, that being said, if I'm just going to go leave somewhere and pick one of these phones to take with me, 8 times out of 10 I'll take the HTC One, but if I'm going somewhere where I need to take a lot of pictures, for example, I'm probably going to give the nod to the Galaxy S4 just because the camera is better. It's just a better camera. That being said, HTC One, I really hope it comes to Verizon in some shape or form, some variant, maybe a black or red and black version on LTE bands. That would really make this the ultimate daily driver for me. Throw some stock Android on it and it's a keeper. But yeah, go ahead and leave your comments down below what you think is the better device or which one you would pick, and a thumbs up is definitely always appreciated. But either way, thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.